Hello, you're listening to the Clasax Victoria podcast. I'm your host, Brendan Toohey. You're listening to episode 8, where today we're talking to a very special guest clarinetist, Marc Naylor, who's visiting Australia from the UK. I'll let him introduce himself and his experiences and his travel plans while he's here. So, yeah, Marc, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to Australia.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a long time.
Yes, tell us about what brings you here and the story leading up to you being here on this trip.
Well, when I was 10, I was brought over here by my parents because I was very ill with chest problems. And they brought me here to, make a recovery, and I did. And then I did all my schooling here and ended up at Haileybury College in Keysborough.
Yep.
And took great part in the music there. And I started playing the clarinet because obviously you can't bring a piano over on the ship because it was ship in those days, of course. We had to do a 6-week trip, which was pretty grueling back in the day. And it was quite something. I started playing the clarinet because of that, and also it helped my chest. And I had started with a really nice chap called Peter Anderson who lived in St Kilda. And after a couple of years, he said to me, I really think you should have another, go to your next teacher. And he sorted out lessons with Philip Michel for me. And I've never looked back. And the reason I'm here is that Philip's 85 this year, and I wanted to do something for him for his 85th birthday, and I've never forgotten him, and he's always been a really big moving force in my life, and what he taught me has never left me. And although after I studied with Philip, I went back to London and I studied with Jack Brymer. Philip's way of teaching and his methods and the sound especially have never left me, and of course he taught me to play exactly the same way as he did, and I think that was quite general for him as a teacher. I think he taught everybody to play the same way, because whenever I gave a recital, people used to come up to me and say, oh, you're one of Philip Michel's students, aren't you? And I said, well, how do you know that? And they said, well, it sounds like him. And it was a great compliment, really, to sound like Philip. And he was a fantastic teacher, and he was an absolutely brilliant player. I mean, there's no doubt about it that at the time he must have been the best in the world. And certainly when the MSO went over to London, they played a concerto with them, and the papers said he was the next clarinetist to look for. He was going to be the world beater.
Wow.
And sadly, he went back to Australia, and nothing ever happened. And I always felt very sad about that, and I said to him before I left him, I'm so sad that you are not better known. And he said, oh well, I'm quite happy. And he has been very happy, and I've been I've been talking to him on and off for years, and I wanted to see him. Now he's getting on, and so am I, and I just thought, well, it could happen at any time, and so I thought I'd come back, and then I had the idea of giving this recital, and I spoke to a few people over here, and they suggested I look at tempo rubato, which I did, and it was a nice haul. It turned out quite well, apart from sticking keys. And, it's funny actually, because all English clarinet players seem to be doomed as soon as they come over to Australia. I know Jack Brymer said the same thing to me. He said, oh, I got terrible sticking keys when I was there. And in fact, I remember I have a recording of Jack playing here, and he says in it, and obviously has a sticking key, and he says, "Oh, these clarinets are, quite remarkable, and they'll always let you down if they can, And I think the problem with my instruments are that they live in a very, very different climate all year round, and they don't go out of that climate very often. I mean, I play a lot in Europe, and it's the climate's very similar, and I did wonder what would happen when I brought them over here, and they haven't cracked, thank goodness. And but the keys are sticking, and I think the metalwork might be tightening up a bit in the heat. But I mean, it was a very nice venue, and I enjoyed playing, and I hope Philip did.
Yeah.
So that's how I'm back in Melbourne.
Fantastic. Let's back up for a moment and talk a little bit about your kind of formative years. So you mentioned you went to Haileybury College.
Yes.
At Keysborough.
Yes.
At the time, was Keysborough the only campus that Haileybury had? Yeah.
No, they had the junior school in Brighton.
Okay.
And it was much smaller though. It was very small.
So I don't know if you know, but Haileybury's the largest school in the Southern Hemisphere now.
Is it?
They've got a campus in China. They've got a campus,
Wow.
They've still got Brighton, and they've got another campus in Melbourne. They've got a bunch of campuses.
So that's brilliant.
Yeah, it's a huge school with a very big music program. So
that's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
So you were studying, and then you got onto Philippe Michel. That was still while you were in school?
Yes, it was. It
Yeah.
was while I was still at Haileybury.
Yeah. And then after that, went to Victorian College of the Arts. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
For a year.
Yeah. So what can you tell us? Do you have any memories of your time learning with Philip during those years?
It was quite daunting
Yeah.
for somebody like me, I think, who had. Well, Peter was very good, you see, because he was very flexible, and he looked on me as a young person, and I can wholly identify with that, having taught loads and loads of young people. But Philip was very, very serious, and he was going to mould me, and looking back, that's great, and it was great. And yeah, I wish I'd had longer with him, really, because he was a marvellous teacher, and he used to teach you in the way I think that he had probably been taught by Jos Michaels, because although his sound isn't overly Germanic, it did have a little bit of the Germanic tweak to it, and it was very straight, and it was just an absolutely beautiful sound. Unlike any other clarinetist I've ever heard, actually. I mean, if you listen to Jos Michaels, it's very straight, but then if you listen to Dieter Klerker, you get this quack sound that he used to make, which was him. And then Philip was sort of closer to Michaels, but had a little bit of the Klerker in him. And he was a marvellous teacher. I mean, he did make you do the same piece until you got it right, and that's what I liked about him. It wasn't sort of, well, I mean, I have to say, when I went to Jack Reimer, it was sort of, what are you going to play next week? Having played through a Brahms sonata, and he would write a few things on the copy and then say, okay, well, and in fact, I did say to him on my first lesson, what do you want me to do in that piece, and what would you like me to, for next week? And he said, oh no, you've done that. He said, just bring along something else.
Wow.
So it was repertoire for 4 years, really, with him, and orchestral extracts and everything, of course. He did take me through the orchestral repertoire, which was very handy. And but Philip was a very special teacher, and I'm sorry that more people can't experience that, actually, because he was firm, but he didn't make you want to not come back, if you see what I mean. And he said to me the other day, actually, he said, all I wanted to do was make people enjoy the music. Well, I'm not sure. He wanted you to play it properly, and I think that is what enjoyment is, actually, because people want to hear people play well. They don't want to hear you play badly. Let's face it. That's not career building. And Philip was interested in you playing well, I think, and giving you the technique to do that, and then to be able to put your own interpretation on it when you're a bit older, I think. And I mean, his interpretations were absolutely 100%, especially Brahms, Mozart, and those sort of things, that sort of era. Okay. Beethoven, he was absolutely magnificent in those. He didn't like the sort of jazz-inspired things, and I did get in trouble a couple of times, so I won't go into that. But yeah, I think he seems to have mellowed a lot, and he was saying how much he enjoyed Michael Collins playing at the Copeland the other day to me, and I thought, well, that's something. Yeah. But yeah, I can't thank him enough. If I thanked him every day for the rest of my life, it would be still too little.
Wow.
And everyone else pales into insignificance, really, because although studying with Jack was, and it was an experience, and him being world renowned. And he was in his 70s, mid-70s at that stage. And he was still amazing even then. I mean, he still rode his motorbike into college at 75. And
wow.
we'd sit in there, and of course, back in the 80s, we didn't have CDs and all that sort of thing. So he used to bring his Walkman in, and he used to have a set of earphones, and I'd have a set of earphones, and we used to listen to orchestral work, and then he'd have the part, and that side of his lessons were the real gold, because he taught you what he'd been through, really, and of course you used to get the anecdotes along with that, which were jolly entertaining. No, Philip will always be the man to me, and I'm really sorry that all his recordings haven't been released, or some of his recordings at least haven't been released, because he was playing things back then that people are just discovering now, really. And he was playing the Shklovsky Sonatina and things like that, and they didn't know that piece in London when I went back, because I played it at a recital and they didn't know it. And I thought, I thought that was run-of-the-mill repertoire, which it was here. And the things like the Martineau Sonatina and that sort of thing, people didn't play those works here. And yeah, it was wonderful being his student, and as I say, I can't thank him enough.
Oh, that's brilliant. Excellent. Those two works that you mentioned, the Slowsky Sonatina and Martineau, they're both on the AMEB list for examinations here.
Excellent.
Did you do any sort of AMEB exams?
I did, yes. Yeah? I did 7 and 8.
Okay.
Well, no, I'm talking about with Philip now. I did up to grade 4 and 5 with Peter Anderson, and then I did 6, 7, 8 A-Mus and L-Mus with Philip.
Great.
And yeah, I went all the way through, and great. It was a great board even then. I mean, they were stretching the envelope, I think, and the amount of scales you had to do for the L-Mus was quite frightening, really. Yeah. But you didn't do them all, obviously, but you did get asked quite a few of the hard ones, and
wow. Okay. Well, yeah, it's good that those works are still there on the list today. So that's great. Really good. So you finished studying with Philip, and then you went back to England, studied with Jack Brymer. Mm-hmm. What happened after that?
Well, I studied with Jack, and I studied basset horn with I have to edit this.
Going
bit.
back a long time.
Yeah, it is. Stephen Trier, sorry.
Yeah.
And saxophone with Steve as well. And I then met a pianist who was lovely, and she was related to Sidney Fell in a way, and I had a few lessons with Sid, and he said, "Oh, I can fix you up with a pianist if you would like an accompanist," and I said yes, I would, and he introduced me to Marjorie, and we formed a trio with a chap called Charles Mainardi, who was a violinist, and he had been playing in London theatre orchestras for years and years and years, and he was a marvellous musician. And we started playing all the trios that you would normally expect to have a violin in, Bartok and the Cacciaturian especially is a great love of mine, and we did play that a lot. We had a piece written for us, but I can't tell you who by now, but it was called Avram Block, and it's apparently this Czech folk tale, and this chap wrote this absolutely brilliant piece for us, and it was a sort of tone poem, one movement. Lovely piece. We played that an awful lot, and then in between we would play a solo each, and Charles would do the usual, violin repertoire, which he could play beautifully, and Marjorie and I used to do Brahms or Horowitz Sonatina was one of our special things that we did. So that's what I did for quite a long time with Marjorie, and then out of college we formed lots of students got together because we couldn't get any work, and we were told we wouldn't get any work, which was lovely, wasn't it? Got through a 4-year course at the Guildhall, and then were told about a week before we left that we wouldn't be getting any work because there were too many people out there. And we had people in college like Tasmin Little, and I knew Tasmin really, really well, and she was known before she came to college, and her parents wanted her to go through the music college experience. Why, I don't know, but she was a master soloist then, and absolutely brilliant. But yes, at that time there were 2 little jobs and so many of us coming out of college. I think there were something like 16 clarinet players at least for every job that came up.
I don't think much has changed.
Well, no, but it's probably more now.
Yeah.
But I think the jobs have increased slightly. They have in London because there are more theatre jobs now. But certainly the symphony orchestra jobs are very few and far between still, and they're not taking extra players on very much. So we formed our own orchestra, and we got a grant, and it was called the New Chamber Orchestra of London. And we played. Well, we had a grant we managed to sustain our grant for 10 years, and then the government changed and they cut the grants and we died. But it was 10 years we gave about 6 to 8 concerts a year, which wasn't bad for a small group, really. We managed to find rehearsal premises, and I was very kindly given the use of a church in London for us to rehearse in, and we did, and we used to play lunchtime concerts there occasionally. And it was the way that many students went in those days, and they formed their own chamber groups and got grants, and so that they could actually have a living. And it was a bit hard, but then again, at least we did have 10 years of orchestral experience by the time that you could go into an audition and they could see that you'd actually done the job for a while. And yeah, that was interesting. And then of course it gave you a chance to do concerto playing, and I did, and which I love doing. I mean, that's my one love is playing concertos with orchestra. So we did that, and then I had my chamber ensemble as well, and that went on for quite a long time. And then I formed the Stadler Ensemble with string quartet and a singer, and we did all the Mozart stuff, that you do, the quintet. And I managed to find a few of the unfinished works, but in completed form. And we started playing those, and I had a bass clarinet, and made the most of it really, and played the A basset version of the quintet, and we did the parto parto and non più di fiori with basset horn, and it was lovely. And we backed a program, a competition to write new works for basset clarinet, sorry. People just internationally sent me music. I mean, it was an amazing thing, And we gave a concert at the end, and the winners of it, and first and second places of each section, because there were basset clarinet and piano with quartet, unaccompanied, and with singer and quartet. And yes, I mean, it's just absolutely amazing, the works that turned up. And a guy called Istvan Bozicevic wrote me a piece, and I have played it since. I was thinking about playing it here, but looking at the piano part, I didn't want to make my pianist have to learn so much. And she was marvellous, Victoria. Yes, so all these works are now published, and they're either self-published by the composer or they're published by the composer's publisher, and so there's a lot of new basset clarinet music out there, and which I feel, I've done a job there. But I also keep asking composers to write for me, and I have just had a work. I've been told it's finished, which is by a Canadian composer, and he is very, very good. He writes very I don't know how to. You could only say it's by him.
Right.
I mean, it's typical of the man.
Very distinctive style.
Yes, and he's been through a lot recently, and I wasn't expecting to get the piece at all, actually, because of what he's gone through. He lost his wife, and it's been hard. But he said to me, I'll either write you, because he said, I started a basset clarinet piece many years ago, and then he said I couldn't get on with it, and didn't know which way to go with it. And so I wrote to him, and his name's Franklin Stover, by the way, and he's finished this now, so I'm eagerly awaiting the manuscript to fall on my doorstep. He hasn't done a piano reduction yet. He's written it's 4 strings, clarinet and string orchestra, and he's going to write a separate piano reduction, which will no doubt be published and go on sale at some stage.
Great. When
I've played it for the first time. So it's really nice to, have that happen.
Yeah.
And I've asked Carl Vine, who you've probably heard of, he's Sydney, I think, from what I can remember. He's in Sydney at the moment, certainly. Yeah. I heard something by him the other day, strangely enough, and I thought, gosh, I'd love that's absolutely wonderful music. And so I the internet is brilliant, isn't it? Just, you know, I mean, we didn't have the internet back in the 80s, and it was airmail letters. No, you've probably never seen that, have you? It was a form, and it had folded bits that you had to fold in, and you wrote on it, and then you folded it all up and stuck it together, you know.
Wow.
And it was at least a 2-week thing each way. So it was a month before you got an answer, minimum. And that's how we did it in those days. And to be able to email somebody is just an absolute dream. I'm so glad that I'm young enough to still love it, because I wrote to him before I left England, and he wrote back the same day. And I got a response the same day from him saying, yes, I would love to. And, you know, can you get in touch with me, or will you be, you know, able to? And I said, well, I can certainly email you when I'm in Melbourne. And we can chat about it, and he's really interested in writing for it. So
excellent.
Yeah, so I'm really going for it with the basset clarinet, because I think it's a really beautiful instrument, and it needs I think it needs a new Anton Stadler to stick up for it and have people write for it. And so I've asked Carl to write something, and I've asked Debbie Wiseman to write something, because I was at college with her, and I don't know whether you know Debbie over here, but she has come on. I mean, she's well, if not world known, she's certainly Britain known, and she writes loads and loads of music for television. Beautiful stuff, really tuneful and, you know, lovely. And I've spoken to her recently, and she said, yes, yeah, I'll think about it, you know. And I said, well, you know, I need to know how much it's going to cost. And she said, well, I'll let me think about the work first. And, you know, she said, what do you want? And I said, well, Weber concertino length, to give her something. Well, it's about 10 minutes.
Yep.
You know, and she said, well, do you want movements, or do you want a continual work? And I said, that's up to you, you know. Far be it from me to dictate to a composer what they're going to write, because I don't think that's very helpful, to be honest. I think it sort of puts them into the sort of mindset of, oh, he wants this, and then they have to feel that they have to, you know, fit that in, and they might think, well, actually, I don't want to write that. I want to write a Rhapsody type of one movement thing, and, you know, I'd be happy with whatever I got from any composer, really, as long as it's playable. If there are things that are not playable, then that's different. But I think these days the not playable argument is almost out the door now, isn't it? I mean, you know, they used to be back in my day when I was younger. There certainly were composers that used to write silly things. You know, like Allegro with demi-semiquavers in it, and it was literally note spinning, and if you could get your fingers around it, you were lucky. But I think we're coming round we're going back the other way now. We've gone through the massively contemporary style of let's push every instrument as far as it can go, and we're coming back to tonality again, and we're coming back to technique again, and I'm so pleased with that, actually, because although, you know, there are players that are absolutely fantastic at contemporary playing, like Bridget Berg, who, having grown up with her, she is just such an awesome player now. Listening to her last night was just an amazing thing, and you know, it's I know it's 40 years, but it just seems like it was yesterday. And she's hardly changed, I have to say, and she's exactly the same as are all her sisters. I mean, they're exactly the same. And yeah, I'm really pleased that we're starting to think musically again. I think it's very important. Not that I'm, you know, saying don't write. Don't try and push the envelope a bit. But I mean, I will always prefer to play something that is tonal, and that sounds the same every time it's played. Now I know that might sound a bit, I know I'm not talking about interpretation here, I'm talking about one piece that can sound so different between one player and the next that it doesn't bear any resemblance. And that you can never get a definitive performance to study, if you like, which is like Harrison Birtwhistle's music, for example, that has a lot of improvisation in it. And when I was at Guildhall, we played one of his pieces, and then the City of London Sinfonia did it in the evening, and he came to listen to our performance of it, and then they did it in the evening, and he was very pleased with ours. He said, "That's wonderful. Thank you very much." So I then had to rush home because they were doing it live, and I rushed home and said to my parents, "Put the radio on quickly." And I thought, yeah, there are bits that sort of sound like what we played, but the rest of it was actually completely different. And you had different players, and of course you had Anthony Pay playing the clarinet, and he just improvised in a completely different way to the way I did it. And I just feel, well, isn't that? I've always felt in a way it's a little bit of a cop-out, but no disrespect to any composer at all. I know it's the technique, and that's what you have to do. But it does change the thing of the work being almost a different work. And I've never been able to get to grips with that, with the contemporary things. But I have played quite a lot of contemporary music. I've done the Berio Sequenza and that sort of thing, and played some of the lesser stretching, I would say, that don't stretch the instrument so much, and they don't ask for multiphonics and that sort of thing. But yeah, and I respect people that can actually play these pieces seriously and make them sound good. And that's, at the end of the day, that is what you've got to do. You've got, as a musician, you have to sound good, and you have to make the music sound good. And you have to put the composer first, always, I feel. Even when you're playing works where the composer doesn't live, is hundreds of years ago, like Mozart and Dancy and those sort of people, you have to remember the composer is probably listening somewhere and is thinking, that was a nice performance. I enjoyed hearing my piece again, and it's very important as a musician, I think, that whatever you play, whatever instrument you play, you put the music first. And I certainly got that from Philip, and I certainly got it from Jack Brymer. That was the one thing they both, if you put them together, they would agree on, and Philip got it one way and Jack got it the next. But of course Jack had the luxury of teaching people that had done all the exams and got to as high as they could in their exams, and then they went to music college, and Philip was still trying to get me to play the clarinet well at that point, and he did, and it's marvellous. And I'm very surprised to hear from him that he had quite a lot of contemporary music written for him. And he was telling me about a piece that for wind quartet and didgeridoo.
Oh, wow.
And it was written by the chap who wrote Sebastian the Fox.
Oh. I don't know, but
Soonest. George Dreyfus.
Oh yes.
George Dreyfus.
Yeah.
And he was telling me about this piece, and I've never heard it. And he said, "Oh yeah," he said, "you ought to hear it," because he said it's very good. And I thought, wow. But he would never have mentioned those sort of things back in the day, And so it's lovely to have been able to have a really long conversation with him, and I sat with him for a couple of hours, and we just talked music and what had happened, and but I love being back in Melbourne.
Great.
And if only I could stay, I'd be fully happy. But I have a dog waiting for me at home, but I would love to be able to move back here. But it's impossible in a way for me. Not because of my age. I have to put these people that say, "Oh, I can't do it because I'm a certain age." It's the actual physical problem of moving all my music, and I've got a huge music library and a huge record library and CD library and tapes, and it would just, I'm sure something would suffer coming back here, and I would hate to lose anything, because I do have quite a lot of live recordings of Philip, and that was back in the day when you were holding a microphone in front of a loudspeaker and telling everybody to go out the room, for 15 minutes while you recorded what you wanted to hear, and then of course we got to the point where we could plug in to the amplifier and to the tape recorder, and that was it. Then we could record proper clean recordings, and I used to take my tape recorder to all Philip's concerts. I know it's a bit cringy now, I suppose, to say that, but I did used to listen to them over and over and over, especially if it was the work that I was doing with him. I used to listen to his recordings, and they were incredibly helpful, actually. They were amazingly helpful, and if they were clean enough, I would think about asking his permission to have them put onto CD. I might still, if I can find somebody who can do a good audio job on them. Because the thing that upsets me the most is that people that are coming up may not have the chance to hear him play. And, we do have the chance to hear these people play, even if it's on 78 and, re-audiotized 78 recordings. We still have the chance to hear these old players play, which is fantastic. And then for somebody who grew up being able to record properly, Philip, for young students coming up, not to be able to sit down and listen to this chap play, I just think it's a travesty. And I don't know who's contacting the ABC to put my case, but I really hope that before too much longer there's something is done for him, because he deserves it. I mean, he's worked incredibly hard during his life, and he's never shirked, ever, and he has gone all over the country playing. I've discovered, since, and he never talked himself up at all. He never told you what he was doing, apart from if he knew you could get to it, he would mention it, and just in passing, oh, by the way, I'm doing this if you feel like coming. And I did. I mean, I went to Music in the Round every year, and is that still going?
They've got like similar programs where they might give free concerts in Sydney Myer Music Bowl and things like that.
Oh, so you still have the Myer Music Bowl?
Yep.
Is the Downers Brooks Hall still going?
So I'm
Is
not sure.
That great big hall up at the top of Melbourne?
Oh, look, it possibly maybe.
Might be about under another name now, but
yeah.
it was a massive concert hall, absolutely, and it had an organ in it and everything, and the MSO used to play up there a lot.
Okay.
I think people need to have the ability to hear him again, and not just what they may have heard of him today, if they're one of his students, for example, but when he was in his element and at full flight, he was an absolute stunning clarinetist, and I never heard him make a mistake, ever.
Wow.
Now, he will tell you that he did, and he said to me the other night, actually, he said, God, it's an awful thing, isn't it? He said, I can't play for days after that. And I said to him, well, when did you make a mistake?
Yeah.
And he said to me, oh yes, all the time. He said, I used to make, and I said, well, you would never have known it, because he was perfection. And I've never heard another clarinetist who could record a piece live, and they used to use the live broadcast recording without patches.
Yeah. one take,
Yeah.
release it.
And
Yep.
I mean, what a thing to show your students. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
great. And so I'm really glad I lived here at that time, and there was, when you look back, you have to say there was something guiding you. You know, there's some force somewhere guiding you, because had I not been ill, I wouldn't have come to Melbourne and wouldn't have played the clarinet, and wouldn't have met Philip. And you know, it's
funny like that.
Yeah, it's been an incredible journey actually, and it's a journey I'm absolutely going to keep going as long as I can. And I still do quite a lot of practice a day, and not this week, but I do practice about 4 or 5 hours a day still.
Wow.
I used to do 6 when I was at school and doing my homework.
Oh.
I used to be up to about 1 in the morning doing homework.
Wow.
At Haileybury. It was shocking. We used to have every subject every night, and it was, and of course there weren't. It wasn't 2 years for fifth form, year 11.
Yeah, year 11 and 12. Yeah.
Year 11 and 12, and then it wasn't year 13 and 14. It was 1 for fifth form and 1 for sixth form. So you had to do it. You know, you had to. And we had the higher school certificate back then, and I don't know what they called the fifth form one, but you had to work. And I'll tell you a little funny anecdote.
Yes,
my
please.
accounting teacher. Two things I'm actually good at is playing the clarinet and I'm not being boastful now, accounting.
Okay.
My other subjects were, English was fine. I loved English literature and English. I had a fantastic English lit teacher, and they're all sadly now dead. I mean, it's terrible to think of it. But I had a brilliant head of music at Haileybury, absolutely amazing man. He could just enthuse you. He was Welshman, and he grew up. I think he grew up here, and he was just an amazing chap. A chap called Ivan Collins, and we had pianist, organist called Frank Williams, and he was a lovely man. He was absolutely typical Englishman, really. Ivan could enthuse you, and he used to shout at you, "Do you feel jiff, boys?" And we all used to say, "We feel jiff, Mr. Collins." And it was called G, I feel fit, is what it stood for, you see. This is so I had that sort of, and he had real energy, you know, he had real energy. And I just was at that time when there were all these incredible musicians. Had Geoffrey Crellin playing the oboe in the MSO, you know, it was just at that magic moment, really, almost. And it was, I mean, even these sort of, you know, people you would have said were amateur musicians were as good as any professional I've ever met in England at that time. You know, and some of the amateur orchestras were absolutely brilliant. Looking back, you know, if you had to put the South Melbourne Symphony Orchestra up against one of the local bands at home, the South Melbourne Symphony would win every time.
Wow.
They were good, and there was a lovely chap called Milton Thrift who used to conduct it, and he was getting on at that point. And Philip was coming to do the Mozart with them, and Milton knew I was one of Philip's students, and he said, we've only got Mr. Michel for the last couple of rehearsals, but he said, we are lucky in that we've got his student with us. And I thought, oh no, what's he going to do? And he said, would you mind playing the solo part in for us? So I then stand up with the South Melbourne, it only in rehearsal, but I then had to play Philip's part as though it was going to be him, you know.
Yeah.
So, and luckily he had taken me through it before, so you know I knew roughly what he'd do. But yeah, I had a lot of opportunities here which I wouldn't have had in England at that time. And as I say, I probably wouldn't be a clarinetist today. I'd probably be doing something else entirely, probably not even music, or maybe I'd be a pianist, I don't know, because I started on the piano. And it was only the move to Australia that my father said, well, you know, I want you to keep your music up. We need something portable. What do you want to play? And I said, well, I don't know really. And I'd heard Benny.
Sorry to interrupt the podcast here, folks. It's at this point that the building's fire alarm decided to go off. So we had to pause recording, and here is us after the fire alarm had finished. Okay, we're back.
Right.
So, Marc, you've mentioned your basset clarinet.
Yes.
You've mentioned that you have a huge music recording library and sheet music library. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering about your sort of extended instrument collection, because I think you have a few interesting instruments in your collection.
Yeah, you could say that, yes.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your basset clarinet? You showed me your bell last night, and it's fascinating. I mean, I'll have to put a picture up on screen.
Well, I've managed to buy very cheaply, I have to say, which is the reason I bought it, a LeBlanc basset clarinet in A, and studying. My other great interest is studying Anton Stadler, and looking at the picture and looking at what instrument makers are doing for the early music people. I decided I was going to have the Stadler type bell and extension put on and have made, and a bent tuning barrel at the top, just as an experiment. Really, just to see whether it would have any, make the sound change the way it was reported to have done on the early instruments for the modern instrument. And so I asked a firm called Martinelli's in America if they would do it for me. And he was very good, and he sent me various ends to put on and try for pitch. And we made it, the bell was always a removable bell, and we worked out how we could get the right tuning down there for bottom C and as it happens B, and so I thought, yes, I'll try that, and I was really pleased to find that actually it did exactly what the reports of Stadler's basset clarinet said that this thing did, that this globular bell, and it used to stick out in front of it and made the lower tones resemble the horn. And people have said, oh, basset horn, obviously. Well, I'm not so sure, because basset horn, even in those days, was well known. It was better known than it is today. But I think if you were having a reporter actually writing a review, which it obviously was, they would have known the basset horn, and he put resembling the horn. Now I've always taken that to mean the French horn, natural horn, and it rounds out the bottom note, D and the C, amazingly. It does make this very, not veiled, but it doesn't have the edge to it. It takes the edge off the sound. And of course the beauty is that you've got the hole, the vent hole, where it comes through, and if you do cover that up, it does indeed give you a B, which is where I think Mozart got the idea from, because there are people that say that he would have written B, and certainly there are a couple of places in the concerto that if you're looking at the extended version, for basset clarinet, then it makes sense to play a bottom B at times. And I think I have this vision of Stadler mucking about a bit with Mozart, and they were having a jolly good time, and him saying, look what I can do if I cover up this hole,
the bell, yeah.
And so it left Mozart with the opportunity, and I think maybe having a little bit of a joke back with Stadler of putting a couple of bottom Bs in, and but then again you're up against tradition as well, and there are still clarinetists that won't play a basset clarinet. They won't touch it with a barge pole, and I think that's a shame. Dieter Klucker wouldn't. He said that he felt there was far too much interest in the instrument rather than making music on it. Philip, I asked him, and he said it never, struck him as being an option for him. And other players have said the same thing. I mean, Jack said to me, although Jack had a hand in designing the Bassett clarinet for Peter Eaton, he wouldn't play it. He said to me, "Oh, I'm too old now to go that way," and to relearn, I suppose, a piece you've been playing for a long time in a new version is probably something you don't want to waste your time doing. Especially when we don't really know what Mozart actually wrote. I mean, I think the educated versions are probably what he did write, and I think we're pretty close to having it down now. And I love the Bassett clarinet but I love the Bassett horn as well. You see, I absolutely love those two instruments, and it's just so nice, being able to play the Bassett horn and being able to play the Bassett clarinet. I'm having a Bassett clarinet in B flat made for me by Steve Fox, and he's making a bottom joint for me for a Buffet B flat, a very old Buffet B flat clarinet that I bought specially for the purpose. And I think he's having a few problems with the bore size, because he said the bore size is unusual, but that's up to him. But it's the cheapest way to get a Bassett clarinet in B flat, is to get people to make the joints, and no full-time maker will make a B flat Bassett clarinet at the moment. I think Segelka do, but none of the Buffet, Selma, all those LeBlanc, they won't, because there's even less music written for those, and unless you're going to sort of push the boat out and really get new works written for you, you're still. It's something I've thought about asking people to write for the Bassett clarinet. You're always going to have to ask them to write for the Bassett clarinet in A, because the B flat is so rare. I mean, it's rare enough to find people that have their own Bassett clarinets, let's face it, without saying, well, I'd like you to play it on the B flat one if you wouldn't mind getting another instrument, and it's. So, but at least if there are more works for the Bassett clarinet and the interest grows in it, that's what I'm interested in. And yes, I know people are going to compose pieces and then put alternative versions for the A clarinet without the extension on, and I think that will always happen, because until the argument changes. And I think that's only going to change with finding the original manuscripts. When it's, we now know exactly what Mozart wrote. We don't play it on this clarinet anymore. We play it on this clarinet now. And I think until that point, we're always going to have people that learn, well, certainly students are going to always learn this on even the B flat version transposed, well, with the piano part transposed. And then be able to play it on the A clarinet with the A piano part. Certainly they're not going to be able to afford a Bassett clarinet at that age, unless they've got very wealthy parents. But I think as the interest grows in it, and there's more repertoire coming out this end, on modern repertoire, I think it's got more of a chance of catching on again. Because it was very popular in its day, and there were several other players that had Bassett clarinets made for themselves, and it's. I think it deserves a new life, and more people. And the thing is, of course, the more people that buy them, the cheaper they'll get, and I think that's all for the good. So hopefully eventually you'll be able to buy a Bassett clarinet for under £10,000, and well, Segelka are very expensive, and I had to take a breath in when I got the letter from them, because I looked around various companies, and Segelka were the only people that produced a B flat. And I went for so they do a lower joint option, and I said, yeah, I'll have the joint, you know. And then I thought they'd actually quoted me for a whole clarinet.
Wow. And
so I emailed them again, and I thought perhaps I've filled because they have this form that you fill in with what you want, you know. And I thought perhaps I've put full clarinet on there, and they've came back with this quote, which was breathtaking. And they said, no, that's just for the joint, made to fit your B flat top joint. Wow. And it was 5 figures. It was absolutely astounding. And I said, and I just wanted to know, how much is the full clarinet then? That was high 5 figures. And it was 25 to 30 pounds, £30,000. Now that's about $60,000 roughly.
Wow.
Ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
So nobody's going to buy, unless you're making the pounds, dollars, whatever, are you going to be able to buy one of their clarinets? And I think that's a great shame. And I'm really pleased that some of these new makers are catching on, because I play on all C clarinets, which are Italian. It wasn't by design. I was in house one day in London, and I saw this beautiful clarinet in Coca-Cola wood standing in the case, and I said, "Oh, can I try it?" I was just interested really, and tried it. Shouldn't have tried it. That was it. I went home that night and asked my parents if they'd buy it for me, and it was second hand. It had been done up and everything. And I've played on it ever since. And then I had Howarth once again. They contacted Orses and had a B flat made, an A clarinet made in the same wood. It's much brighter looking because it hasn't aged so much and it's not varnished. The B flat's varnished. But it's the same, and it's got the 3/4 bone fingerings on it. It's bone without, it's full bone without the low E flat,
right.
And that's what I play on. And as I say, it wasn't by design at all. I wasn't even looking to start playing any different instruments from the buffets I already had, because I had such terrible trouble when I went back to England to find an instrument that wouldn't crack. And I tried 10/10s because I thought, well, going to Jack, that would be, the thing. And I thought this is the thing to do, very naively. And both of the pairs cracked, and I took them back to Boozy and Hawks, and I said, sorry, I've got to have a pair of instruments I can work with, And so I bought my parents bought a new pair of buffets for me, and they were lovely. And I had my old pair of buffets done up and by them, and they came back as being beautiful. I had an R13 and an S1 in my original clarinets, because my grandparents brought the S1 over from England, and of course the S1 is sort of English bore. And the new buffets were absolutely beautiful, and I played them and of course they were much better matched. The A clarinet was much better than the S1, and I got on with those, and that's what I had, and that's what I went to college with. And most people by then were playing on buffets. In fact, I think there was only one chap who was a really good friend of mine who played on 10/10s and still does. Plays an Emperor E flat. He was very, very into the English clarinet, and which is great really, because I think in a way England has lost its sound, because the sound was always either Frederick Thurston or Jack Brymer and Gervais Supplier, and
then Emma Johnson or something like that.
Yes, okay. Well, you had Bernard Walton, who was the sort of Thurston side, and Thea King, who was the Thurston side, because she was taught by him, obviously, and then married him. And I mean, I have a lot of respect for Thurston because he was not a well man for most of his life. He played on one lung for most of his life.
Oh, wow.
And he played the Mio concerto, I understand from people. And I've played that, and it's not easy. It's 4 movements of practically no rests.
Yeah.
And to do it on one lung must have been a real feat of. So I really respect that man. And having heard him play, the recordings are not great, but they're good enough, And he made a lovely sound, but it was very straight. It was the English straight sound. And I think we've lost, when people like Tony Pay retire, we will have lost the English sound, and people are now making a sort of homogeneous English, German, French sound, or certainly English, German sound, because a lot of people go to study in Germany still, and that's brilliant. I wish I had the chance, and I wish I'd had the chance to study with Klöcker. I would have loved to study with him, and I've got most of his recordings, of which there are hundreds, literally hundreds. And he was an amazing man, but I went the other way, and it was by force really, but I loved studying with Jack Brymer. I won't say I didn't, because he was a lovely man and became a great friend of mine. And I saw him, used to go and see him quite often outside college. Once we'd finished college, I'd finished college, he used to invite me over and say, "Oh, come over for lunch and have a chat," It's lovely.
Excellent.
And he used to show me his instruments, and so yeah. But as I say, he wouldn't touch the basset clarinet. I'm afraid he thought it was out of he said, I like to play the pieces the way I know them. And fair enough at that age. I think I think I don't think if somebody came out with a new clarinet tomorrow that. I mean, I have tried loads and loads of new instruments, and I make it my business to, because I think it's important not to put your head in the sand and say, oh well, Buffet and Selmer, they're the only ones, and Orsi, yeah, they're all right, they'll do. They'll do for me, and I could not afford to buy a new pair of clarinets, no matter what make now. And I know what I can do with those, with my Orsis. I know what they'll do at any tick of the clock, apart from when the keys get stuck in the hot concert halls. Yeah, I mean, they're very nice instruments, and they're good for me. But I do go and play new instruments that come out, and I go up to Harrods occasionally, and they'll let me try things and have a play through new things. And they certainly are making leaps and bounds, these new instrument makers, and I'm glad, because the old firms they've monopolised the thing for so long, without any competition apart from within themselves, that they could more or less agree what they were all each going to charge for their instruments, and they were always near about the same. Selmer, Buffet and Leblanc are nearly always within 50 quid of each other, And I think the fact that you've got people like Bakun, who you know well, and other instrument makers, and Americans especially, Segelkas on the continent, they are, they're offering competition, and I think that's very, very good. It's healthy. It's very healthy, and also if you get people that can correct certain things that clarinets are, as you know, well known for. I think if people can come up with ideas and correct certain notes by doing whatever they do, the undercutting of moving the tone holes, and that sort of thing, and having extra vents, and I think that's all for the good. And the fact that also the other thing is I'm very interested in is that people are now looking at playing Erler system and reform Bowen in England, and I think that's an amazing thing, that people are actually now being able to play professionally. I mean, you wouldn't have been able to do it in the 80s when I was there, because you wouldn't have been able to play an Erler clarinet in an English orchestra, and you can now. there are people that do it, and I think that's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And I love the Earl clarinet, and I do play them. And for certain pieces, I play the Earl clarinet because the fingering system works better for certain pieces, I find. And of course, you get the Germanic sound, and they're lovely. I have a pair of Wurlitzers, which were new when I bought them, and they weren't cheap, but they're much more expensive now. I don't know how students afford their instruments anymore. I mean, I know probably the parents, but I don't know how some of the parents afford them.
Yeah.
Because it's not just like a buffet E12 anymore for a few £100. It's even the E12 is now, and the B12 has gone up in price. And the B12 was always the go-to clarinet for my students.
Yep.
I used to find students come and they nearly always had a B12. And they were great clarinets for teaching students to play because they always worked. And they bounced nicely if they dropped them as well. That was the thing. You didn't end up with damage or keywork, if they did knock them or something. They were well made. But now to get those, you've got to go back to the sort of Selmer console time before American Selmer I'm talking about now, not French Selmer, but when they were making plastic clarinets, and you've got to go back that far if you want to find a decent clarinet for not a lot of money, and certainly in England. And there are people. I mean, you can find them, and if you get your student to look around and they don't just plump for the cheapest thing, because I have seen some really terrible clarinets come through my door with my poor students whose parents have just gone for the all-in-one package, type clarinet. And I'm sure you've seen those. But,
anything that's bright red or bright, green or yellow or blue. Yeah.
Although the Vito clarinets were all right, the colour clarinets, they were good because they were the same as they just made them out of a different resin.
Yeah.
They were the one coloured clarinet, brightly coloured, happy clarinet that did work actually, and I've had quite a few people start on those with me. I mean, the only thing is it's I suppose it's a little embarrassing when they realise that they've got something that doesn't look like a real clarinet.
Yeah.
But to be honest, you're not on them that long, and if it keeps them going, because they've got that rather than the boring black one, if it keeps them practicing and loving the instrument, that's all you've got to do is get them to love it enough to practice.
That's right.
And that's your job. It is almost done then. Then you can sit back almost and say, now you've got the idea, now run with it. And that's what I love about teaching. Although I'm sad to say in England you have got the children are, and I say children because they are of primary school age, they are so pressured in their schoolwork now that to ask them to do more than half an hour a day is beyond.
Yeah.
And I've had parents say to me, well, you can't expect them to play something, practice something they're not going to use in their career. And my response is, well, why aren't they going to? Why aren't they giving themselves that option of becoming a musician if they want to? I mean, and they said, well, the money, it's always that, it's the money, And I said, well, your half of your pleasure, or more than half of your pleasure, is playing and being able to play all these wonderful pieces. And yes, I agree that the money isn't always good, and that's a terrible thing to say, but it's true, as you know. And I think that needs to be addressed more than anything, that musicians are still being looked at as being second class. Just as they were back in Mozart's day, they weren't allowed to go through the front door, they had to go through the servants' quarters and all that business. And although that doesn't occur today, we are still being, you've got to be a really, really top name to even be able to ask for high money for giving a concert or playing a concerto or whatever. And I think that we have, certainly in England, we have a long way to go there. On the continent, it's different. You are respected, and musicians are respected a lot, because I think the educational system in Germany and France certainly includes music from, all the way through. They don't have this optional thing where music drops out after about year 5, and then you can do it or not at year 6, and then you go into a senior school and Form 1, and you take it on or not. And I think but they include class music all the way through, and I think that's a very good idea. And we used to. I remember doing it music when I was in primary school, and we used to do all sorts of musical things every week, and movement, and and it's suddenly stopped, and now people they're realising, and they're bringing things like moving to music back and thinking it's a brand new idea. Well, it's not, because I used to do it when I was 5 and 6, and it gives you something, being able to hear the music and feel free enough to move with it, I think. But then you've got to stop yourself moving when you play the clarinet, haven't you? You mustn't move too much. I can't, that's one of my things. I don't like watching players that move too much. I find it really, really off-putting. And I don't know how they can do it and keep the embouchure firm, and and Philip never did. He used to stand, and he was like, really, really still.
Okay.
And it was all here and all here. And he used to accent things, but he never swooped and swirled, and But I guess that's, you get freedom in one way, and you've got to have it all the way through. But and if you can play that way, then I suppose who am I to say that you shouldn't? And I don't know really, but so that's the basic clarinet, and I do have a collection of simple system clarinets as well, and I have a full set of saxes as well, just because you need to, as a sort of playing musician in England, you need to be able to turn up with anything almost. And in fact, I did have to play the recorder in a show. Clarinet, doubling alto, sax, and recorder.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's a show out there with treble and descant recorders in it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's the one. It's the film about where the men learn to become strippers.
Oh gosh.
So if you ever play that show, make sure you put a descant recorder with you.
Amazing.
But, yeah.
Fantastic. Mark, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
I feel like we could talk about each of those elements, all day. But for now, we might have to wrap it up. Do you have any final kind of parting thoughts, or a funny story you want to share, or a shout out, anything?
I think the thing is that you've got to stick with it, and it's very hard for early learners to stick with it when they see somebody of my age get up and play, or even somebody of 20 get up and play. They'll look at you and they'll think, well, you're grown up, of course you can do it. And they don't realise the amount of work it takes to become that. And I think one of the things that, and I think the most important thing is to remind them that, you went through exactly the same thing they're going through. You didn't suddenly pick the clarinet up and could play it instantly. It's, you've got to practice it every day, and you've got to do it religiously. And if you do, you'll be able to play the clarinet as well as you want to. And if that's not up to, if you don't want to become a professional musician, that's up to you. But you need to remember that to get to the point where you can play well for yourself, I think is very important. And then if you do want to go the extra mile and become you think I'd love to play in an orchestra, it's the practicing. You've just got to keep practicing and learn the music and learn it really well, almost that you can play from memory. But I never do. But yeah, you've got to have that, and I think that's very important to younger players. And I think once they get past that, you don't need to. You need to encourage them, but you don't need to help them through, the hard part of learning anymore. That they can play the clarinet well, and you've then got the beauty of being able to encourage them and help their technique and their sound and everything else, and introduce them to repertoire, which is what I love doing with my students when they get to that stage. I love showing them things, and saying, well, have you ever heard this? And I'd be, when I was studying over here, you used to be able to say to somebody, have you heard the Weber concertino? And they used to say yes. This was not anybody. You could say, oh yeah, I know, yeah, I've heard that, yeah. In England, you say to a man in the street, have you heard Weber's concertino? they'd be asking, sort of looking at you as though, who is this old chap speaking to me in the road, But classical music isn't encouraged in England enough. But I know it is here. I know the ABC does an incredible job, and although I haven't seen it, I understand the new concert hall is amazing, and that was just being built when I left. They dug the footings, shall we say, and they were putting in. They just started it. Literally,
Wow.
You could look down from the bridge and see it, and that's my one regret, that I wasn't here to see that open, and it's such a shame, because apparently it's got an amazing organ in it as well, so which I love. That's my second interest in life.
Okay.
Is playing the organ. But
Cool.
yeah, I think make sure all your students can get through the hard bit, because I always feel I've failed if somebody says I don't want to play the clarinet anymore.
Yeah.
And I take it very personally. I don't know if that's right of me to do that, but I've learned to take it on the chin over the years, because if everybody you taught over the years went on to become professional players, we'd have far too many. They wouldn't be able to get jobs, which is that's another thing which we need to talk about in the next one.
Another time.
Yeah. But thank you very much for the opportunity, Brendan.
No, it's my
I really
pleasure.
like it.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed myself.
I completely agreed with everything that you've said, particularly teaching students, particularly to be self-aware and have self-discipline to self-correct and just foster that natural love of learning so that they can teach themselves over the years. That's really important. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. And
Pleasure. No, it's a pleasure.
yeah.
Thank you. I'm really glad to have done it for you.
Oh, thank you. And to all you listening and watching, thank you for sticking around. I hope you found that informative and enjoyable. Make sure that you comment, like, subscribe, all that jazz, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks.